Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My guest today is Rich Forer. This is Rich's third appearance on my channel. So thank you, Rich. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
My pleasure.
How's your day been?
Uh, Pretty good. It's warm where I am. Thank God.
That's good. That's good. That's good. So how are things in America?
Terrible. We have a
Right.
out of control lunatic president who has no redeeming values. He's committed to vengeance and to not losing face, which is a very scary thing because um, the reports I've seen indicate that he and the United States wants to make a deal with Iran and to end this. Oil prices are going through the roof. The cost in my state alone, the cost of gasoline is up well over $1 in the last 3 weeks per gallon. That means it's up more than 35%. And, the economy is hurting. People are having trouble buying groceries. And this guy, Trump, who only entered the war because he was convinced by Netanyahu and Miriam Adelson's money that he should enter the war, he just decided he can destroy anything he wants because he's the president of the most powerful country on earth. But he doesn't know anything. And he's so easily manipulated by an equally sick megalomaniac by the name of Benjamin Netanyahu. And of course, as most people know, Trump received about $250,000 from Miriam Adelson for his presidential campaign against Kamala Harris. And she wanted, one of her goals was that he give Israel the green light to take over, to annex the West Bank. So in any case, because Trump doesn't know anything, he's easily manipulated, not just because he doesn't know anything, but because you can praise him and get him to reward you for praising him. Because praising him makes him less aware of what a monster he is and how much suffering he is constantly experiencing. I always say his real goal, unconscious though it may be, is to make the world pay for his suffering. That is his true goal. And because he doesn't know anything when he makes decisions, those decisions unconsciously tend to be accurate in choosing the worst approach possible for any issue. And so now who knows what's going to happen? I mean, you probably read reports that a day or two before the United States decided to bomb Iran, Iran had agreed not to enrich uranium. And they had gone, and from what else I read, they had gone beyond the John Kerry, Barack Obama plan, the JCPOA, that the Obama administration had negotiated, that the Trump administration just trashed in 2018. Now, if you don't enrich uranium, you can't make a bomb. And also, as Trump should have known, Iran disavowed nuclear weapons in 2007 and has never really gone back on that disavowal. So then you get Trump has Jared Kushner, who's a big settler advocate who donates to Likud settlements in the West Bank most of his life, friends with Netanyahu his entire life, and Steve, whatever his name is, Witkoff, who's another Zionist. And they don't know anything at all about atomic energy, about negotiating with Iran. And yet they represent Trump. And of course, they're heavily, heavily biased towards Israel. And I've read in a number of places, I can't corroborate this, that they were telling Trump things that they knew would be, quote, beneficial to Israel's interests. In other words, that would encourage Trump to attack Iran, as Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying to get the United States to do for 40 years. And for 40 years, Netanyahu has been saying Iran's on the verge of a nuclear weapon. We have to stop them. In the meantime, Israel is a nuclear power that is not a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, as Iran is. So you get Kushner and Witkoff, both of whom can make a lot of money through the suffering of Palestinians and are very beholden to Israel, talking to this ignorant clown and getting him to do what they want. So now, because Trump can't lose face, that's one thing that cannot happen. What is he going to do? He's already losing face, so he's starting to, talk about how powerful the United States is, and that they can destroy Iran. But who knows how far he'll go? The longer Iran lasts in defending itself against Israel and the United States, and the more desperate Trump becomes in trying to end this war, he's irrational enough he could use a nuclear weapon, and so this and Israel, Israel obviously doesn't care about human life, at least not in the Middle East outside of Israel proper. So Israel could use a nuclear weapon, just end it. So we'll see what's going to happen, but the problem is Trump's toadies, the people he selected for this term, he made sure that he chose people who lack character like him, and who will put his interest, his personal narcissistic interests, ahead of the interest of the people of the United States. And of course, this is costing people, as I said, an awful lot of money. So we'll see what's going on. In the meantime, Israel's also bombing the hell out of Lebanon. They've already killed over 1,000 people. I'm sure they're going to keep a presence at least south of the Litani River for a long time. And all of this is not necessary. All of this could have been or could be resolved if Israel would finally say, okay, for the first time in our history, we will comply with international law, and we will make peace with the Palestinians. And contingent, I'm sure they could get Iran to agree that if Israel makes peace with the Palestinians, a fair peace, that Iran will end its support for Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas, and this and they could use as the basis for this peace the Arab Peace Initiative, which has been on the table since 2002 and does provide full diplomatic relations with Israel, between Israel and every single Muslim nation on earth, which includes Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, right? And I believe there's 57 such nations. And it also provides security guarantees for all the states in the region. And effectively, it doesn't quite spell it out in this language, but if you read the document, it does give Israel a veto over a right of return. So it's a plan that pretty much every Zionist I knew up until maybe 10, 15 years ago would have been thrilled if Israel had signed it. So for example, like in the year 2000, when Clinton, at the end of Clinton's presidency, the United States held the Camp David Peace Summit in Maryland between Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak. And it sounded promising from the newspapers in the United States, which of course were not doing very much investigative journalism. They were pretty much taking the word of Israel and its representatives in the United States, which was that Ehud Barak is offering over 90% of occupied territory, of what is currently occupied territory, to the Palestinians in exchange for peace. And people to this day still use I often see the figure 97%. Israel offered the Palestinians 97% and the Palestinians rejected, so that's why there's no peace. And their message is, therefore, it's okay for Israel to commit genocide. The Jewish side accepted the UN partition plan in 1948, and the Palestinian side rejected it. Therefore, everything that happened is the fault of the Palestinians. So let me just give you an example about this logic, because I'd like to get into the thinking of Zionists, because I've had a lot of discussions with them, and I was once one, and most of my family is. They don't care about the facts. They make up the facts as they go along. They hear sound bites from Israeli spokespeople and never investigate it. Or their investigation, they'll claim they've investigated. They'll claim they've researched the history. And what they mean is they read a book by Alan Dershowitz, Israel's lawyer, or they Googled something and spent 30 seconds to 5 minutes reading something. So to give you an example, in these discussions I've had in the past couple of weeks, It's very common for Zionists. First of all, none of them will listen to anything I say. If I provide them with documented evidence and even the source material that they could look up, they won't look it up if it's a challenge to what they want to believe. They'll insist that they're right. So, for example, the 1947 UN partition plan is a very good example. It's one of the main arguments they use along with the Camp David Peace Summit, which we can get into in a minute also. But the 1947 partition plan was passed, in which it would create a Palestinian state on 43% of mandatory British Mandate Palestine and a Jewish state on 56%. The Jewish state was to have 80% of the coastline and most of the fertile areas, and Bethlehem and Jerusalem would not be part of one or the other state. They would be part of a corpus separatum administered by the United Nations. And the argument of these Zionists is, as I mentioned, well, the Jewish side accepted partition and the Palestinian side rejected it, so that's why there's all these problems. Now think of their logic. They don't want to go any further than that soundbite. Like they can read one or two sentences, and to them, that's the pinnacle of research. So, first of all, why would anyone think the Jewish state would be content with 56% of Palestine without Jerusalem when they've never been content with the 78% they've controlled since 1949? Secondly, these Zionists don't bother looking into the fact that the Jewish state under partition would have started out with just over 50% of the population, and the Palestinian population in the Jewish state would have been over 49%. And the Palestinians have a higher birth rate. It would have eventually become a Palestinian majority state. And of course, David Ben-Gurion always said that a Jewish state should have, his goal was at least 80% Jewish population. Now, what these people also ignore is the fact that for years, for many years, even before the Peel Commission in 1937, 10 years earlier, Ben-Gurion had always said that he would use partition as a stepping stone to, quote, expand into the whole of Palestine. Chaim Weizmann, who was to be Israel's first president and who was the man principally responsible for the Balfour Declaration, Chaim Weizmann said the Jews would be fools not to accept a piece of land the size of a tablecloth, because he knew that once we get our foot in there, we can do what we want. And Menachem Begin, the head of the Irgun and the future prime minister, the Likudnik, he became a Likudnik, it was Herut before it was Likud, but Menachem Begin actually worried that the Arab side, that the Arab states would vote for partition. Why was he worried about that? Wouldn't he want to be sure that the United Nations voted for partition? Well, the reason he was worried that the Arab states would vote for partition is because he knew it would be much harder to steal the land, to expand into the whole of Palestine, if by expanding they were violating a UN partition agreement that the Palestinian or Arab side had agreed to. Moreover, the Arab states had offered Israel a single democratic state with equal rights and protections for both Jews and Palestinians and everybody else, which, of course, the Jewish side rejected because it doesn't believe in democracy. It believes in ethnocracy, democracy among one class of people, Jews. Okay, so that's the background of the UN partition plan. But what these people are saying, well, the Palestinians rejected partition, so the occupation is their fault and the genocide is their fault. Of course, they won't use genocide. They prefer to call it self-defense. And the narcissism is astonishing because they don't care. When I mentioned, well, what about the thousands of people in prisons, most of whom are being tortured? 85 people have been tortured to death. The rapes that go on and on, brutal rapes. The fact that Itamar Ben-Gvir, one of Netanyahu's coalition partners, ordered the prisons to reduce the amount of food that they feed the prisoners, made them keep them shackled 24 hours a day, not let them go out into the sunlight, and stream torture sessions to him so he could enjoy the torture of Palestinians. This is a religious Jew. Okay, this is his religion. And so, and then of course, even recently, I'm getting a little off track here, but even recently, Yair Lapid, who's the head of the more moderate wing of Israeli politics, he just said, I don't know if you heard this, it was just like a day or two ago, that Israel's borders are biblical borders. And he said that perhaps Israel will expand to take over Iraq someday. That's how far. And that's what Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and Netanyahu, the three coalition leaders, that's what they believe in, because they are all advocates of the book of Joshua, which says that that God gave the land to the Jewish people from the river, the Euphrates River, to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. And as Smotrich pointed out, that means Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, all of Palestine. I think I named everything. Although some people have also included parts of Turkey, southern Turkey, and parts of northern Saudi Arabia. So this problem is so serious because if I speak to a Zionist who claims, now let me put it this way, I kind of differentiate between American Zionists and Israeli Zionists. Most American Zionists I know think that they're not prejudiced against Palestinians. They won't call most of them will not call Palestinians beasts walking on two legs, cockroaches, etc., which many Israelis do. So these Zionists in the United States, many of whom I know a lot of them, they don't realize, they think that they are not bigots. They think that they're fair, just like I did at one time. They think that, no, I don't have any prejudice against the Palestinian people. It's just that they're psychopaths who want to kill all the Jews and take over all of Palestine. Even now they're saying that. And whereas in Israel, they're more like the Ku Klux Klan. So, for example, Tamir Pardo, former Mossad chief, referred to Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and I'm sure he could have included Netanyahu. He said that they were much worse than the KKK. But the thing about the KKK is that members of the Ku Klux Klan, they're not shy about admitting that they think white Protestants are superior by nature than Catholics, Jews, or African Americans. Just as a lot of Israelis think that Palestinians aren't even human, they're subhuman, right? They're cockroaches. Well, what do you do with a cockroach? You step on it. Most people will step on it to get rid of it. So there's a difference, but so their self-image, the Israeli self-image, does not require them to be fair and humane to all beings. Yes, maybe they'll say, I'll be fair and humane to human beings, but Palestinians are not human beings. They're cockroaches, they're subhuman. So in the United States, these people think that they're fair, right? And so if they think, if let's say I'm a Zionist and I think, well, I'm a fair and humane person, it's just that the Palestinians want to drive all the Jews into the sea. Well, my internal logic is going to say, if I support Israel, I'm fair and humane. I wouldn't support an unfair and inhumane country. Therefore, Israel must also be fair and humane. So what I'm doing is I'm not seeing the real Israel. I'm projecting my imagination, my imaginary image of what Israel should be, which is a reflection of my self-imagery. I'm fair and humane. I would never support a country that's not fair and humane. Therefore, Israel must be fair and humane because I support Israel. And so what they see, what they defend, what they care about is the Israel of their imagination. They have never seen the Israel that actually exists, okay? The Israel that terrorizes people every day. To them, what Hamas did on October 7th is just an absolute horror. But they can't contemplate the fact that Israel has committed, even before October 7th, Israel had committed far worse crimes than what Hamas did. And I'm referring to Operation Cast Lead in particular, 2008, 2009, where many more Palestinians were killed by Israelis. And then even worse, 2014, Operation Protected Edge, where over 2,000 Palestinians were killed. And I want to mention something, just to give you an example. During Operation Cast Lead, which began December 27th, 2008, and ended about 3 weeks later, Israel's Air Force bragged that, I think they said 90% of our missiles are 99% precise. And those 99% precise missiles destroyed hospitals, mosques, schools, UN shelters, residential neighborhoods. So the precision is we're targeting civilians, which is what Israel has always done, according to David Ben-Gurion, Yigal Allon, the most prominent general of the 1948 war, and Moshe Dayan, and many other Israeli chiefs of staff. Okay? So, and also just to give you an idea of the sadism of Israel, when Israel launched its attack on Gaza on December 27, 2008, the beginning of Operation Cast Lead, they simultaneously violated a ceasefire they had with Hamas and the Jewish Sabbath. Okay? And they attacked at around 11 in the morning in pretty much the busiest shopping area of Gaza, in Gaza City, where everybody was out shopping. I knew a Palestinian man and his son from Gaza who told me that they were out there when the first bombs hit, and they saw they heard these explosions, and they saw a woman flying through the air and smashing against the wall and falling lifeless to the ground. Okay, so that was December 27th. Exactly 2 weeks later, on another Jewish Sabbath, Israel denied the entry of desperately needed humanitarian aid. And the reason it denied the aid was because we can't violate the Sabbath. Okay, this is how hypocritical this country is. Now, as far getting back to Al-Aqsa flood, the October 7th, 2023 attack by Hamas, I just want to clarify this. According to Israeli Social Security data, 1,139 people were killed. Of that number, approximately 373 were military personnel, which under international law were legitimate targets for Hamas. There were I think I read there were 36 children killed in the attack, one infant. The infant was killed in crossfire. Israel has never released, as far as I can tell, the results of any investigation it had conducted, which tells me that the number of people killed by Israel because it invoked the Hannibal Directive, which is kill any Israeli who's in danger of being taken captive by Palestinians. Israel hasn't released the results of any study. And we know that Israel launched, I think they had Apache helicopters, they launched missiles, they destroyed houses, and an awful lot of cars. And so I don't know what the number of Israelis killed by Israel and foreign workers killed by Israel, but it had to be a pretty significant percentage. And then, of course, Netanyahu went on TV, and especially appealing to the self-described Zionist Joe Biden, who even during Israel's response to Al-Aqsa flood, the genocide, said if there wasn't an Israel, we'd have to invent one. Netanyahu, not that he has to be a master of manipulation when he's dealing with American politicians, because they're so ignorant and so paid off by the Israel lobby. But Netanyahu goes on TV and announces very matter-of-factly, well, they even beheaded infants, Israeli infants, and they raped all these women, and it turns out it was all false. But he was garnering sympathy for the Jewish state, so when they would launch their horrific response, he wouldn't get such blowback. And this was Netanyahu's dream come true. Al-Aqsa flood on October 7th was a dream come true for Netanyahu and for Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. Netanyahu sees himself as the Jewish Mashiach, the Messiah, or the modern-day Moses, I sometimes call him. And he needed an excuse to complete the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and he doesn't care about Palestinian life at all. And actually, I believe most supporters of Israel, and certainly its leaders, believe that they would rather kill all Palestinians, because a dead Palestinian cannot raid a kibbutz. So this gave Netanyahu the leeway to attack, and once they started the attack and had the United States backing, they could just keep doing it. It becomes more and more normalized every day. And so now they're going after everything in the West Bank and in Lebanon and Syria, and they're bombing other Arab states. And I don't know when this is going to end, but I don't see, with Netanyahu in office and with Donald Trump, assuming he lives for 3 more years, Donald Trump is so depraved, he can only get worse. And so, and with the cast of characters around him who are uh, white nationalist Christians who are talking now about apocalypse, and that this is God's will, and that this is, this is this is going to end up in whatever they call it, the second coming of Christ. I'm not very. I don't feel good about this at all. And if you want, I can get more in later. I know you want to ask me questions. I can get more into the denial of the Zionists and how willing they are to totally ignore documented evidence and make up the history as they go along. It's heartbreaking. It's distressing, because a lot of these people normally you would think are decent people, but without their moral support and the moral support of millions like them, and they don't understand this at all, but without that moral support that they provide Israel, Israel could not continue its crimes against humanity, and especially against the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
So
So this thing that you mentioned regarding Ben Gavir and watching live streams of torture, is there any evidence of that? Is it documented anywhere?
I don't have it right in front of you. You could Google it. You could look it up. I've seen it. I've seen it a number of times in a number of different sources.
Right.
I didn't write down the sources, but because I figured anyone can look them up. But I have seen that. I've seen him on TV yelling at shackled Palestinian prisoners, yelling at them as if they're the monsters. And by the way, he doesn't even know. Most of them are probably innocent people who were never involved in any uh, so-called terrorist activity. I mean, Israel's the one terrorizing everything. I want to point out that Hamas, whether you like them or not, I don't like them, but they're a resistance group that was formed to try to expel a foreign invader, like the IRA, the National Liberation Front of Algeria, the Mau Maus of Kenya, it's the African National Congress of South Africa. They all use terror techniques. But what about the Irgun, Stern Gang, and Haganah? They were not the indigenous people trying to expel a foreign invader. They were the foreign invader trying to expel the indigenous people, and they committed horrific attacks. There, I think in both of my books, I quote Aryeh Itzchaki, who was a military historian and the spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF. And he admitted, probably in the late 60s, early 70s, that the time had come, it's time we stopped with the ocean of lies that we have presented people, and admitted that in almost every village conquered in the 1948 war, we massacred much of the population, including rape, taking people and shooting them in the back of the head, and stuff like that. Stuff that I would never have believed was possible for a Jewish state, and stuff that all of these people that I've been talking to, all of these Zionists, don't believe is true. I guess I asked them and they never answered. Do you support the fact that there's, many soldiers have gone on YouTube and bragged about killing children and other innocent civilians? Is that okay with you? And is it okay that Israel rapes many of its prisoners, most of whom are not charged with a crime, and that it tortures just about everybody, and that Israel, by the way, has the highest incidence of rape? Israel as a country has the highest incidence of rape in the Middle East. And they won't answer. All they do is go back to the story, oh, the Palestinians want to kill all the Jews. They want to, like the Palestinians are, even now, after all the suffering they've experienced in the last 2.5 years, they're still intent on killing all the Jews and taking over all of Palestine. Gaza is 53% under the age of 18, So that means there's lots of little kids. Are the little kids, are the infants and the little kids, do they really have this intention to destroy Jews? No, they just want to live in peace. They want to be able to play. They want to be able to eat and not starve to death. So we're in very dark times, very dark times.
So Joe Kent, former director of United States National Counterterrorism Center, he resigned a couple of days ago. What do you make of that? I mean, he was handpicked by Trump.
Right. He
and he
isn't like
resigned. I think what was his argument for resigning? Do you know?
that basically, that Iran did not present an imminent danger to the United States and an imminent threat. And I think that's the standard for going to war. You could say, well, Iran might develop nuclear weapons in the future, so maybe in the future they could present a threat to the United States, but they did not present an imminent threat. And to him, now remember, he served, I guess, 11 tours or something in Afghanistan and Iraq, I think, and his wife was killed. She was also in the army, and so he just found the decency, I guess, the integrity to speak out against the Trump administration because it was his job. It was his job to monitor whether or not there really was an imminent threat. And he doesn't want to see, from what I can tell, he doesn't want to see American service people dying unnecessarily, whereas Trump could care less. Trump doesn't care at all, nor
Yeah, I
does
think the
Lindsey Graham.
timing is interesting because the timing of his resignation, it sort of coincides with Trump thinking that he needs to put boots on the ground. I think
Could
that
be,
might have propelled Joe Kent to resign because
could be.
he may not have wanted American soldiers to go into Iran.
Well, I'm sure that's
Uh,
the case, especially if he doesn't really see an
yeah,
imminent threat. Trump, I think it was yesterday in a press conference, Trump said when they asked him about Joe Kent, he said, well, he's a nice guy, but he's weak. He's weak on security. Well, why did you select him, Donald? Why did you select a guy who's weak in security for that position? And of course, if you asked Trump that, he'd say you were being rude. He'd probably say you were being rude, you know. So, and of course, Hegseth is pressuring all the media you may have seen this, is pressuring the media to report on what's happening in Iran the way he wants them to report. And he said,
yeah.
I can't wait till David Ellison takes over whatever it is, Paramount, whatever, Warner Brothers
So
Discovery.
they've already got CNBC
Yeah.
or CBS, I think.
Netflix.
Yeah, one of those. CBS, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's CBS. Uh, but uh, but this is exactly what happened during the Iraq War. I remember Rumsfeld wanted the news channels to show the news that Bush government wanted them to show, and they
Right.
didn't even want them to show the dead bodies of the American soldiers coming
Right.
out of the aeroplanes. Yeah,
And the New York Times was basically
yeah,
getting its news from the White House,
yeah, exactly,
unbeknownst to its
exactly.
readers, who thought it was
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
doing
yeah.
unbiased
So,
journalism. But
yeah,
Ali, you have to remember, I consider George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, Anthony, what's his name, Tony Blair. I consider them all war criminals, but they're saints compared to Trump and his administration. They would George W. Bush would not have given the green light for Israel to invade Iran with support from the United States. Okay, he wouldn't have done that. Only Trump. All these years that we've had presidents with a hostile Iran since 1979, with a so-called hostile Iran. Well, they were hostile because they've been death to the United States. That's been their slogan since 1979. But still, they never attacked another country. They never initiated an attack against another country.
yeah. That's
But
the translation thing, because when you translate it back to Persian language, it doesn't translate that to America. It's a common phrase over there. I mean, if I'm angry with you, I will say something like this. But the English translation just messes it up, yeah, completely. Plus, they have a good reason to, because
right,
uh, Brits and Americans, I mean, they appointed Shah, the dictator, and Shah had a secret police, and everybody was repressed in Iran
right,
under the dictatorship.
right.
So they have a good reason to. Uh,
Well, and then they've been
but this
repressed under the theocracy under Khomeini and
theocracy
Khamenei.
as well, and also the sanctions, so they never really got a chance, you know. Yeah, they never really got a chance. But despite the fact that they were under sanction, they've done really well in terms of technology and
Right.
and scientific advancement. So that's really good. But this war against Iran, I think it had a double objective as well. I was wondering that one of the objectives by Israel was to get hold of Lebanese land while the war is going on. I think they've done that. So that must have been their secondary objective.
Maybe they were already in the southern part of Lebanon, though, before this war. Um, but who knows? Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Iran war is going on gives Israel
Yeah,
more cover to commit war
yeah,
crimes against humanity in other parts of the Middle
yeah,
East.
yeah, yeah. So, so this Iran war, how do you see it ending? And what's the sentiment in America? Do you know, or at least the people that you talk to?
Oh, well, the people I talk to are all opposed to the Iran war. Most of the American public is opposed to the war. If you just take Republicans, which is Trump's base, I think I read 76% of Republicans support the war. But then you got Democrats and independents, and the number who support the war is a strong minority. Okay. So overall, the United States population opposes the war. Now, remember, Trump campaigned that he wouldn't start wars, he would end wars, right? So, and he would get the price. I think he campaigned, he'll get the price. He was complaining about Biden and the price of gasoline, right? I mean, to say that he's a total hypocrite is really a real understatement, because the hypocrisy is just a consequence of his megalomania. And really, he's his malignant narcissism. I mean, he's really there really isn't a redeeming bone in his body. I mean, I consider the Antichrist to be a consciousness, and what better representative of the Antichrist than this delusional infant who has no redeeming values, and the Republican Party that surrounds him. They represent this consciousness of destruction of anything that doesn't uh, kowtow to their demands. And the United States is I think there was a report recently from some institute that measures democracies around the world, and the United States, they don't even consider the United States a democracy anymore. Now I'm in a better position than most, because I'm not an immigrant, I'm not a person of color, I'm not a Muslim or an Arab, right? And I'm retired and I have enough money to live on. So I'm not as vulnerable as a huge percentage of the American population. Most Americans live hand to mouth pretty much. They live, they don't have much more than what their last paycheck will buy them. And Trump is making things so much worse.
Yeah, that's another thing I was thinking. Where would all the money for this war come from? Because America is already $38 trillion in debt. I think the interest payments alone is around 800 billions every year. That's massive.
Yeah, that
And
sounds right.
where where would all the money come from? Only way I could think of was cuts in social spending.
Right.
So if people are already living hand to mouth, it's not going to go down well. But I guess America has always been a nation that has sacrificed its own people for Israel, which is okay if it's their policy. Yeah, I mean,
And,
an
and and
outsider
Israel
shouldn't object. Yeah,
and Israel has
but
always been a nation that sacrifices its own Jewish population, not to mention its non-Jewish, but Israel has always been willing to sacrifice its Jewish population in order to avoid making peace and grabbing more land. The most egregious example was the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So, remember, in 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel took over the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Egypt wanted that back very badly. And I think it was 1973, the Egyptian foreign minister met with Henry Kissinger. This was during the Nixon administration. And Kissinger, I guess, was Secretary of State at the time, or maybe National Security, but one of those jobs. And he laid out a plan for Kissinger of peace between Egypt and Israel. And Kissinger presented it to Golda Meir, Israel's prime minister, and she did not, definitely violating protocol, she did not present this peace plan to her cabinet. She wanted to keep settlements in the Sinai desert. So what happened was, subsequently, a few months later, I guess it was, Egypt attacked Israel, and they inflicted a lot of damage on Israel. Israel finally won the Yom Kippur War, but it was a 3-week battle. And in those 3 weeks, On a per capita basis, Israel lost as many of its citizens in just 3 weeks as the United States lost in 10 years in Vietnam. It was all avoidable because Israel ends up making peace with the Egyptians in 1979, and the peace plan they agreed to was almost identical to the peace plan that Henry Kissinger had presented Golda Meir 6 years earlier. So this was greed. This was Israel's megalomania in thinking, oh, God gave us the land, or whatever they think. Maybe Golda Meir probably wasn't religious, but we can take as much land as we want because we're the power. We're the main power in the Middle East. And again, they're willing to sacrifice Jews, Jewish people. And what's ironic is when Israel commits all these atrocities, and Zionists don't understand this. This is how demented their thinking is. When Israel slaughters babies in Gaza, guess what? People all around the world start expressing anger against Jews. Not everybody, but a portion of people will generalize the actions of some Jews and blame all Jews, okay, which I don't agree with. But Israel then says, well, everybody's anti-Semitic, therefore we have to be even stronger. And so what happens is Israel incites anti-Semitism, and then because there's anti-Semitism, claims that it has to be draconian with its neighbors and with the Palestinian people. And I have had people tell me that, well, I said to one Jewish Zionist, and they all usually have the same responses, but I said to him, do you think that calling for equality for the Palestinians, well, actually he had said that this was the case. He said that calling for equal rights for Palestinians incited anti-Semitism. And I said, well, do you think that killing thousands and thousands of people, including infants and babies in Gaza, incites anti-Semitism? Killing them in the name of the Jewish people, does that incite anti-Semitism? And he said, no. And then you hear there's these examples, like I'm in the Boulder, Colorado area. And in last June, there was that firebombing attack by an Egyptian national who came up from he was about 80 miles south of here. He came up because he had looked for something that he could attack, some Jewish event that he could attack. And he knew that there were these marchers who marched around the mall in Boulder, waving the Israeli flag, singing Hatikva, the Jewish national anthem, flaunting their contempt for Palestinians, and calling out the names of Israelis who were held hostage by Hamas, ignoring the fact that Israel held 9,000 prisoners at the time and was torturing them mercilessly. So this guy wanted to get revenge on behalf of his people because as he told the FBI, they're killing my people. So he firebombs some of these people. Fortunately, only one person died, unfortunately, an older woman. And afterwards, all these people who were part of the march were calling the incident an anti-Semitic event. He attacked us because he's an anti-Semite. He hates Jews. Ali, I had some conversations with a couple people who were part of the marchers. These are educated people around my age, maybe a little younger. And I said, don't you think that in order to prevent future attacks like this, it would be helpful to take some responsibility, that we all should take some responsibility for the pain in the world? Because we're all in this together. We all contribute to the collective of mankind, to the collective mind of mankind. And they said, oh, that's ridiculous. And I said, don't you think, I said, he told the FBI, because the Boulder newspapers were reporting on this more so than other newspapers. He told the FBI that he didn't have an argument with the Jewish community. He was angry at Zionists. Zionists were killing my people, quote. And I said, don't you think that maybe he was upset because people he knew were killed by Israel and he took it out on the closest Jews he could find? And they said, that's ridiculous. He's an anti-Semite. I said, so let me make sure I understand this. The reason he attacked your march was because he's an anti-Semite. So if another country other than Israel, a non-Jewish country, was slaughtering Gazans and other people in the Middle East, since his motivation to attack your march was anti-Semitism, and he wouldn't have the anti-Semitic rationale to attack anyone else. You're saying he wouldn't have attacked anybody, and then of course they don't answer me, and then they'll say something like, "Well, in 1929 in Hebron, Palestinians went on a rampage and killed a lot of Jews." Well, they forget that a lot of Palestinians sheltered a lot of Jews, but then they say, "So there." In other words, in 1929, and they don't read the Shaw Commission report that came out after that 1929 riot, which mentioned the fact that for many years prior to that, the Arabs of Palestine were upset with what was happening with the Zionist movement encroaching into their land and not respecting them. So basically, but their logic is, well, in 1929, Palestinians in Hebron massacred some Jews. So, therefore, it's okay for Israel to commit genocide. Now, they don't say, therefore, it's okay for Israel to commit genocide, but they imply it. They're too irrational and too narcissistic to come up with that, to acknowledge the end point of their logic, the conclusion that their logic leads to. But what they're saying is just like with the partition plan. Well, the Jews accepted partition, the Palestinians rejected it, therefore the occupation is Israel's fault. All the attacks that Israel conducts on the settler attacks upon Palestinians is their fault. The Gaza genocide everything is the Palestinians' fault, because they could have accepted the 1947 partition plan, which of course they knew that if they accepted it, Israel was going to violate it. I mean, they all knew. David Ben-Gurion had been talking about this for more than a decade, that they were just going to accept partition as a stepping stone. Everybody knew, So
Yeah, it's the same way when when Trump was running for president, he was saying that most Muslims in America knew who the attackers were, 9/11, stuff like that. So, labeling entire community as one. So, but that's acceptable. If that's acceptable, then labeling all Jews as one is also acceptable, right, I guess.
And yeah, by the way,
it's not. That's the thing, because they are individuals in the groups. That's the thing. So,
yeah, they're generalizing. And by the way, yes, anti-Semitism has increased, but the level of bigotry towards Muslims, especially from the Trump administration, has been ramped up to a very high decibel. Anti-Muslim hatred is really significant in this. Islamophobia, in my opinion, is far worse than anti-Semitism. And of course, Israel supporters, the people who are always crying anti-Semitism, like Jonathan Greenblatt of the Anti-Defamation League, they equate criticism of Israel for anti-Semitism. So if you criticize Israel for conducting genocide, you're an anti-Semite, because really they're just defending themselves. Those incubator babies, they want to destroy us Jews. And then of course there's that book that a couple prominent rabbis published a number of years ago called The King's Torah, which says that if you think a Palestinian infant is going to grow up to be a terrorist, now how are you going to know that? If you think he's going to grow up to be a terrorist, it's okay to kill him. And by killing them, this is what it says, by killing them, you're ridding them of their evil inclination, their Yetzer Hara, which is a Hebrew term. Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination. And your killing them is an expression of your Yetzer Hatov, your good inclination. It's an act of compassion. This is how sick some of these people have become in their use of religion or any other ideology. This is how inhumane they've turned the religion into a religion of inhumanity and narcissism.
Yeah. Over here also, first, for me, Israel is committing the biggest anti-Semitism in the world by killing all the native Semites, which are Palestinians. So again, from my people who have gone through the biggest genocide in India, the natives, they have a right. So I can see parallels between what the settler colony in Israel is doing compared to what the Britishers did in India, weaponization of language, all these kind of things. So the pattern is very, very similar. And we have a recent example in India of how Brits colonized it and used language and all these kind of things. So, because I mean, we consider uh, Palestinians are native Semitic people, so if you kill them, it's anti-Semitism.
Right,
But over here also, so Zionism is being equated to, I think, Judaism or Jews. So saying that Zionists are evil or bad, it's saying that Jews are evil or bad. So people
right.
have been
Some
convicted over here.
people, yeah, well,
Yeah,
prominent people. Well,
yeah,
prominent people like Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the largest Jewish civil rights organization in the world, not to mention, many Jews in Congress, in Trump's administration, the billionaire Jews who support Israel. They all associate, whether they're doing it strategically or cynically, they associate criticism of Zionism with anti-Semitism. Now, what I say to that is, let me make sure I understand this. I'm calling on Israel to comply with international law and ideally be a light unto the nations. And because I'm doing that, that's anti Semitic. But supporting Israel's violations, endless violations of international law, crimes against humanity, and its refusal to follow the law and make peace with the Palestinians, that's not anti Semitic. That's support for Israel. You know what? Real anti Semites incite anti Semitism. This is what I tell them. And I don't know anyone who incites anti Semitism more than Israel and its supporters. Also, and I don't know, I may have said this in one of our other discussions, but their criteria for proof that you are not an anti Semite is that you ignore documented fact and believe Israeli Hasbara, which is easily debunked, fantasy. Number two, you have nothing but contempt for international law. That's a criteria for being a supporter of Israel and not an anti-Semitic. And number three, callous indifference to the suffering of non-Jews, especially Palestinians. So,
yeah,
but Ali, if someone told a Jewish person, well, Jews, real Jews, who support Israel, have callous indifference towards the lives of Palestinians. They have nothing but contempt for international law, and they think documented history is a farce. Most people would say those qualities are reflect upon very poorly upon Jews. And Zionist Jews, I always say, well, the proof you're not an anti-Semite proves that you are an anti-Semite. You know,
yeah,
because I mean, it's this is how mixed up their thinking is. They would take that definition of being a true Jew, a Zionist Jew. They would take that definition that I just described as a mockery of Judaism and call it anti-Semitic. And yet,
yeah,
it's true. And they would call it anti-Semitic, which means that the proof you're not an anti-Semite, according to their definition of anti-Semitism, proves that you are an anti-Semite. They are so confused. They don't know what they're doing. They're so out of touch with their humanity and so unconscious and so unaware of not only their connection to all of human beings, not just Jews who they narcissistically see themselves in the shoes of, but all people, that it, this is the definition of hell, in my opinion.
yeah. Again, so I mean, for me, Israel is the most anti-Semitic country, committing a genocide against the native Semitic people of Palestine. And also with Australia, it's expected because Australia is built on genocide of the native Australians, or Aborigines as we call them over here. It was a colony,
Right.
and slavery was still legal till late 1970s in Australia. So you can use Aborigines as slaves here.
Wow.
So it's very recent, and it's very understandable that Australian will have laws that sort of demonize resistance and upholding of United Nations and international law. So let's see what happens. But this Iran war, if it drags on for, let's say, another month or so, then I'm guessing America would have to put soldiers inside Iran or somehow need to get soldiers inside Iran. And it's not going to be easy because Iran is a very, very big country, 93 million people. And they are well trained, they're smart people, they're proud people. So there will be many losses, American losses. I'm not sure if Americans will come out of it as victorious. Because
Well, I mean,
What's your take on it? I mean, how do you see it ending?
I'm not sure. There's just so many possibilities. The United States and probably Israel trying to encourage the Kurds to initiate a ground invasion. I don't think they should. I don't think they should because I don't agree with this war. But from their point of view, I don't think it's wise because I think a lot of Kurds will be killed. Um, if I've been reading some economists who've been saying if this goes on for another month, it's going to really have huge deleterious effects on the world economy because the price of oil will really spike much more than it is now. And you know, for Trump to go in with ground forces, that would be so unpopular in the United States that I'm not sure. I think he'd rather use a nuclear weapon, honestly. And then again, we've got Israel. This is all being done for Israel, which is what Joe Kent said, which of course anyone who follows the history knows that this is the case. Why doesn't Israel, if Israel's so intent on destroying Iran, let them go in? Israel doesn't want the United States to make peace or to make a ceasefire. Israel just wants to continue the killing and the destruction of Iran. The United States, they have different goals, objectives than Israel does. Okay, but because Trump is so easily manipulated, you just don't know what he's going to do. But I do know that he wants to save face, and he wants to maintain whatever popularity he has, at least with his base. And he's losing popularity with his base as long as this continues. I mean, when you got Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, and that and Joe Rogan criticizing him, and what's her name? The African American woman, Candace Owen, and I
Candace
think,
Owens. Yeah, there are
yeah,
many people criticizing Trump for the foreign policy. But it's amazing because when George W. Bush was running for president, uh, there's a speech by him saying that it's not America's responsibility to go around the world and make peace between nations or invade nations under the pretext of peace. But that's exactly what he did. Obama said the same thing. Uh, Biden didn't say it because Biden knew he had to go and support Israel. But Trump said the same thing. He shouldn't be waging wars, but everybody does that. Uh, I think because there is an actual military industrial complex here in
yeah.
America that benefits. Plus, I think there's a Israel lobby as well. And I heard from probably John Mersheimer in one of his interviews, I guess, that there are ex-IDF soldiers serving in White House.
Oh, I'm
So
sure.
if people like that are in White House and they are advising, the U.S. government, obviously the policies will favor Israel in that
Right.
regard, and the
Well, I
peace
mean,
won't be a consideration. Yeah,
the Bush administration, all those neocons were Jewish people. Douglas Feith, Wolfowitz, Scooter Libby, all those guys had dual citizenship. They were Jewish. They had dual citizenship with Israel. Hillary Clinton's main donors were Jewish Zionists. Mitt Romney's 8-person advisory panel on foreign affairs when he ran for president were all Jews with dual citizenship. And Romney said the first thing, if he got elected, the first thing he would do would be to sit down with Benjamin Netanyahu. Newt Gingrich got $5 million from Sheldon Adelson, and the next day went out and announced that there was no such thing as a Palestinian people. And of course, we know about Trump. They're all prostitutes. They don't know anything. Most senators, there's a few exceptions, Bernie Sanders, Chris Von Hollen, and a few congressmen. But most of these people, when you see them on talk shows, most of these Congress people, they don't know what they're talking about, especially the ones who are venting their prejudices, like Lindsey Graham, for example, or Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, who came into the Senate to be Israel's protector. None of these people know anything about the history, or if they do, they're much worse than I even think they are. Because if Ted Cruz knew that Israel's entire history has been to deprive the Palestinians of their rights and ethnically cleanse them from the land through any means necessary, including murder. If Ted Cruz knew that and still was Israel's protector, that would make him an even bigger monster than he was just an ignoramus who thought that Israel was just defending itself. Because that narrative, Israel's only defending itself. The Arab world wants to push us into the sea. That narrative has been around for probably since before my birth, long time ago.
Yeah,
I was born a few months before Israel became a state in 1948. But that narrative has been around, and what narrative has been around for the Arab nations, for the Palestinians? You've got 9/11, right? And people associate 9/11 with all Muslims. They don't
yeah,
differentiate,
yeah.
right?
That's what I'm saying. If you can do that, then you can associate the
Right.
genocide of native Semitic Palestinians with all Jews. I mean, the logic applies both ways. That's the thing.
Yeah, you
But
can. It's wrong
yeah,
in both cases, in my opinion.
exactly. And also, the I don't know. I think the majority of Jews who don't really believe in Israel and its genocidal policies. We have Anthony Lowenstein over here. He's a
Yeah,
I don't believe in religion, so I don't know whether you have to be Jew or Buddhist or no. But yeah, he says he's a Jewish person. He's written books as well. His first book, I think, was in early 2000. He's a journalist. Was My Israel Question, and his latest book, probably 2 years ago, was the Israel Laboratory or something like that, in which he has detailed how Israel uses AI and technology to suffocate Palestinians and oppress Palestinians and monitor and commit genocide, and how Israel is now uh, uh, pushing that technology in America, Australia, UK, and all these countries. And
yeah,
uh,
yeah. Ali, I just wanted to mention something before I forget. You mentioned all the IDF soldiers in positions in the White House. I read about a year or two ago, after the genocide started, that Google had 900 former Israeli intelligence agents working for Google in the United States. So
mm,
Israel has its tentacles everywhere. A lot of it, of course, has to do with the world's wealth because there's so many Jewish
yeah,
billionaires who are very loyal to Israel for ignorant reasons, you know. And then of course there's Epstein, and a lot of people say,
yeah. Epstein is very weird. I think we need to do another discussion on Epstein alone. It's gonna take too much, but it's
well, yeah,
very interesting.
well, a lot of
Yeah.
people are saying that the reason the United States is attacked Iran is because Israel's blackmailing them because it has the videos Epstein made of people having sex with young girls. And of course,
Mm,
if he really did make these videos, and there's been a lot of articles about this, that every room in his house in New York City, he had hidden cameras. If he was really filming people, then there's no doubt that there's lots of films of Donald Trump, his best friend for 10 years, who lived in the same city as him for all these
yeah.
years, who was a sexual predator, just like Epstein. So, of
Yeah.
course, they've got stuff on Trump, and who knows who else, you know?
Yeah. So, so, do you know what they teach in Israeli schools to children? Do you have any idea about the curriculum? Because I
Well,
think last
they
time you
do.
mentioned that they have different gradings for Arabs or Palestinian or something like that.
Well, I didn't say gradings. What I said was that they'll show like a list or maybe even a photo of all their enemies starting from ancient times to the present. And I do know
Okay.
that Israeli society, the commercials that I've seen on TV when I was there have IDF soldiers in them, attractive men and women, touting whatever product they're selling. The schools are very, maybe not the religious schools, but the schools are very connected to the Israeli Defense Forces. They'll take kids to air bases. In my first book, I write about how young Jewish kids would be allowed to write something on the front of an airplane, and they'd write things like, "Do me a favor, kill an Arab today," or "You're a good Jew, kill 10 Arabs." Very racist information that they're being taught. Now, of course, I'm sure they're also learning it at home, and of course, it's permeated throughout society. But
Mm,
in school, apparently, they are learning that that their natural-born enemies, who are the new Nazis, are the Palestinian people. By the same token, they claim that Palestinians are taught to hate Jews. Now, why would they need to be taught to hate Jews? First of all they have to do is look out their house much of the time and see
Yeah.
Israeli soldiers barging into their home, right? Settlers destroying their crops, poisoning their water wells, attacking people, killing people, pouring gasoline down the throats of people and setting them on
Yeah.
fire, burning little babies to crisps. They see that every day. And actually, the U.S. State Department, this is a number of years ago, but the U.S. State Department and the Harry Truman Institute, which is in Tel Aviv, both said that they were surprised that there wasn't that much bigotry in Palestinian textbooks. They weren't that provocative. And
Yeah.
as any Palestinian who grows up in the West Bank or Gaza can tell you, well, what do we need to be taught to hate Israelis? Mostly the only Israelis we see are soldiers who are making life hell for us and torturing
Yeah.
us and arresting
Yeah.
us and beating us.
And if those soldiers were Christians or Muslims or Buddhists, Palestinians would hate those. So yeah, it doesn't
Right,
have to be a Jew.
but
Yeah.
Ali, that level of hatred, I am amazed that. Okay, let me put it this way. Well, I know a lot of Palestinians. I'm very close to some Gazans. They're not in Gaza now, thank God, but their families are. Most of their families are, or are dead. I am amazed at how little hatred they have for Jews as a group. Most Palestinians I know, there's some exceptions, but most Palestinians do not generalize the actions of the Jewish state onto all Jewish people. And as I think I told you once, when I was over there a couple times, when I would be walking the streets by myself or get lost and talk to Palestinians or just talk to them, just as I passed them, it was very common to them to just tell me, and I told them I was Jewish, but I didn't start a conversation about the Israel-Palestine issue at all. I asked them, where's the nearest restaurant? Where's this? But they would say, Judaism is not the problem. Zionism is the problem. That's what they would say to me, But, and here's something that I'm not exaggerating. I have met some Palestinians who are absolutely enraged at what Israel has done to their people, especially since the genocide, this latest genocide started, right? They're enraged. They're irrational even. They generalize onto all Jews. I can understand it. It's unfortunate, but I can understand it. But it's a very tiny percentage of Palestinians I've encountered. Yet, if I question a Zionist, usually Jewish, but not necessarily, if I question a Zionist who hasn't lost anybody to the fighting over there, and I challenge them on their beliefs, and I show them that their belief that Israel's always wanted to make peace, all these ridiculous beliefs, if I just challenge them on that and show them that they're wrong, they get more violently enraged and irrational than the Palestinian does. And it happens all the time.
Yeah, I've
And as I
seen that
said,
on different shows as well. I think there's a show called Piers Morgan something, and he invites some Israelis, and they go nuts, start
right,
shouting. I have no
right.
idea why they get
Oh, it's
so
crazy.
unhinged. Yeah, during conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you may have seen Rabbi Shmuley Boteach screaming at Norman Finkelstein on Piers Morgan's show
Yeah,
like a
that didn't go well
maniac.
for Rabbi Shmuley because Norman Finkelstein was very calm and
Yeah,
poised. Yeah.
yes, he
So,
was.
yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really amazing how
Yeah.
irrational and how
But one of the
hysterical.
things that, yeah, one of the things that I noticed was uh, in Australia, they were trying to, or they are trying to sell Gaza and West Bank land to Israelis or Australians over here. So they are trying to have real estate seminars. And apparently those are Jews who are doing it. So that's going to bring a bad name
Well,
to
it's
rest of the
probably
Jews because, yeah.
Ali. My first thought is it's a scam. They don't.
Mm.
First of all, how are they going to sell land? Did you say Gazan land?
Gaza and West
How,
Bank.
how are they going to do that, especially Gaza, when Trump's stupid organization that he's in charge of controls Gaza technically? right?
It may
How
have been
the
only West Bank then, because
yeah,
I've seen pamphlets on yeah in a video. Must have been
and they
West
do that in
Bank.
the United
Yeah,
States. I think we talked about this. They do
yeah,
that in New
yeah,
Jersey,
yeah.
for example.
Yeah, I'm not sure
And
how that's allowed because under international law, those are illegal settlements.
right,
So yeah,
but
yeah,
Israel doesn't comply with international law, and the United States supports Israel's non-compliance with international law. So I don't
yeah,
know. You know,
yeah.
it's just
I wanna,
another.
yeah,
I was
I
just to
want
say,
to
it's
show
just
you
another
something.
example. Oh, go ahead. Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
want to show you something. This is probably what you were talking about. So this is a. Let me know when you start seeing the screen.
Okay.
So I'll play it now.
In Gaza, the problem is not with a terrorist organization alongside 2 million innocent Gazans. What is wrong in Gaza is the society. It is the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is not just a danger for Israel. It is not only an anti Semitic and barbaric organization, but what you have there is a way of life, a philosophy, an ideology that is the number one impediment for the Arab world to meet the challenges of the 20th century, let alone the 21st century. Now, some portions of the Arab world are successful. The UAE is the best example. But most of the Arab world is so frightened by Hezbollah or dominated by people close to Hezbollah that they cannot break out this vicious circle that Arab societies have. And they're very resilient in the sense that you cannot destroy. In Gaza, the problem is not.
So I think it's the same level of thinking that you were saying. Many people just, I think, promote this kind of ideology. That's the entire Palestinian community. Yeah,
Well,
and
it's a project. Much of what he said is, especially in the beginning, is a projection. He's describing Israeli society, the thinking
yeah,
of people who support genocide. Okay. But if he's so concerned, if people like him are so concerned that there's anti Semitism and primitive, he's referring to the fundamentalist aspect, and primitive thinking amongst Palestinians, make peace. Why don't you make, did it ever occur to you that you could make peace, that you could, for a change, comply with international law, UN resolution, and make peace? Accept the Arab Peace Initiative that's been available for 23 years. If you had done it, the Hamas's attack never would have happened, that this genocide never would have happened. Get full diplomatic relationship with every Arab world, establish decent relationships, and maybe Arab society will become more enlightened. But there is a lot of Arab society that is enlightened. He's exaggerating. And that whereas there's a lot
yeah,
of Jewish society, I mean, look at the Orthodox. They live in the past,
yeah,
a lot of
exactly,
them. The Orthodox
exactly.
Jews I'm referring to.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. And again, uh, like any group, there are bad actors in that group. So most of the Arabs, they are very well educated. Even Palestinians, the 97% literacy rate,
right.
because education is the only way for them to make a living
That's
when they
right.
go to neighboring countries. I talked to Helena Coban. I think I probably mentioned her to you. She used to be a Middle East journalist.
Right.
Uh,
I've met
uh,
her.
yeah, so she's really nice. She's interviewed Hamas leadership as well. She wrote a book also. So
Right.
she knows everything inside out. And she's met people. She's met professors, Palestinian professors in Palestine, teachers, women educators. So she gave me a very good picture of what actually happens inside Palestine and how they are oppressed and suppressed by Israel. So, mm, so do you have any Palestinians living uh, near you? Because it would be good to talk to you and to a Palestinian together. See,
I do
uh,
have Palestinians living near me.
yeah,
Um, I don't see them that often, but occasionally.
yeah,
Actually, well, do you mean Palestinians who grew up in Palestine, or because
yeah,
okay, yeah, yeah. There's some. There's a couple. They're very busy, but they're because they're working hard. But there's a couple I know who came here from Gaza,
mm,
maybe I don't know, 8 to 10 years ago. And then there are others.
Okay.
around. I
Okay.
could see.
Yeah, I mean, we can organize something. I mean, I sent the email to the people that you asked me to, but I haven't received a response.
Yeah, that's
It's been quite
surprising. They're
some
usually
time.
pretty good.
Yeah, but again, West Bank annexation is going on, so I mean,
Right.
I can understand they will be under duress and they might not have internet connection. But how does the internet and telephone service work in West Bank? Do they get it from a third party, or does Israel provide it? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I know that Israel controlled, even before the genocide, I believe
Right.
Israel controlled the electromagnetic spectrum,
Mm.
at least as far as Gaza is concerned. Um, my Gazan friends often have a hard time communicating with their families in Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm sure that if there is internet, I don't know for sure. If there is internet there, it's probably down much of the time. As
Yeah.
far as the West Bank, I don't know. My guess is that Israel has some control over the internet, over telecommunications in the West Bank, but I'm not sure. I haven't really
Right.
looked into that.
Right. Right. Okay. That is all right. I'll give you the last word, Rich. I think we can do another conversation later. Yeah, because there's
Yeah.
so much to talk about. But I'll give you the last word now before we.
Well, most people, I'm sure, who watch your podcast are on the same side of the issue as we are. Now, when I say side of the issue, my side, I always tell people I am not pro-Palestinian and I'm not anti-Israeli. I'm pro-humanity and anti-oppression. But if I was pro-Palestinian and the roles were reversed and it was the Palestinians oppressing the Jews, well, then I would support that.
Yeah.
I'm not pro-Palestinian because I like Palestinians, although I do. I'm pro-Palestinian, if you want to call me pro-Palestinian, because they're being oppressed. So it's more accurate to say pro-humanity, anti-oppression. And for people who aren't sure what to believe, read a book or two. Get an intelligent book. Look at my books. And I'm not just touting myself, but my books are extremely well documented. They're meticulously documented because when I wrote them with my Orthodox Jewish family in mind. And I knew that if I use sources to make my case, to present the facts and the history, if I use sources that they did not like, such as Arab sources, I wouldn't be able to get them to really open their minds a little bit and recognize that maybe there's something I don't know. So I was meticulous. I used mostly Israeli government sources. So get a book. You can check my documentation if you get my books. There's books by Ilan Pappé, Norman Finkelstein. You could get Benny Morris's greatest book is Righteous Victims. He's a real Zionist. But really start learning the history, because everything that you hear coming out of Israeli society and its followers is false. It is really false. It is almost totally fabricated. And one of the things I discovered once I started seriously studying the history, and by that I mean 3 to 12 hours a day, every day for almost 20 years, what I learned is that everything I believed growing up until I was in my late 50s was either factually wrong, totally wrong, or if there was some truth to it, the truth was taken out of context for the sole purpose of exonerating Israel and the Jewish community and demonizing, character assassinating the Palestinian or Arab community. So educate yourself. You're not going to die if you educate yourself. You're going to open up, your mind will open up, and you'll recognize your common humanity with all people, hopefully. And that will allow you to no longer give moral support to anything that harms human beings, and instead to be on the side of justice wherever justice may lay.
Yeah. No. Thanks very much, Rich. I share the same thinking that you have. Either it's a one-state solution with freedom for all, a democracy for all, or it's a two-state solution, freedom, democracy for all. So I'm also pro-freedom. Yeah, not pro-Palestine, pro-Israel. Yeah.
Right. Good.
Everyone should be free, in my
Right.
opinion. And coming from my background of my people, I can understand what Palestinians right now are going through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Thanks very much, Rich. I'll I'll stop recording now.
Okay, thank you.